Okay, thank you. I'm Jordan Miller, co-chair of the Millage Committee. Thanks everybody for joining us. It's 5:37, Monday, May 18th, and I understand we have a quorum of members on the phone. So I think today we really want to have discussion about the items that we've discussed so far, discussion about the recommendations, and but before we do that, we need to approve the minutes. We failed to do that at the last two meetings. So we have minutes of those meetings, I believe, were sent out, Stan. Is that correct?
They were attached to the agenda item on board docs.
So we're going to need to do a roll call to have those minutes approved. So I'll first ask for, should we take them singly or should we do both of them together?
Either way, we have them on the agenda in tandem to take them both at the same time.
Okay, I'd say we take them both at the same time if that makes it easier for everybody. So I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion to approve both meeting minutes as submitted.
Thank you, Jim.
Second.
We have a second. Who's a second by?
This is Tracy Nahara. I second that motion.
Tracy, thank you. Okay, Stan, you're going to do a roll call.
All set. Callaway,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Barosa de Padilla,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Caniglio,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
McVeigh,
Yes.
Mills,
Yes.
Nahara, Tracy,
Yes.
thank you. Njai,
Yes.
Negron,
Yes.
Mido,
Yes.
Terrell,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, thank you. So that's moved. I think before we get into the discussion, I got a note today from Matt Smido. And he had an issue from the mayor's office that he wanted to discuss. So Matt, if you've got time, why don't you bring that issue up now so we can hear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not more of, I think, just an issue than a statement or a concern. The mayor just wanted the committee to know that he's very supportive of the district's capital goals, but he just hopes that the board ultimately will consider using any new dollars to expand pre-K capacity. That's one of his main goals, is to increase the number of children enrolled at pre-K in the city. And then also to implement any strategies needed to mitigate the dangers caused by COVID-19. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to the board chair and to superintendent if they have comments about that or.
Yes, thank you. And of course, both of those things are very important to the district. Certainly pre-K is something that, we all work hard on. And I know that's very important to the city of Columbus. And at this point in time, I think that in the academic strategy that the superintendent brought forward, we're still working through that. But Dr. Dixon, if you want to jump in on that, you can. But to the second piece about COVID, I think the treasurer could probably speak to this a little better in terms of when the new dollars come in. Right now we're in the midst of COVID planning, and again, the superintendent can talk about the task force she has about what that looks like for the fall and ongoing. So both of those things are very important to the district as well as the board. And thank you for bringing that up. And we thank the mayor for his support.
Thank you, President Adair.
Thank you. As President Adair stated, that the district, we've been committed to a pre-K through 12 learning environment and opportunities for our students. And we will continue to plan with expansion of pre-K in mind. We understand the issues that come with expansion. For example, reconfiguring our buildings, we're redesigning our buildings rather. But we have been committed and we will continue to be committed to that expansion. We want to make sure that we give that opportunity for our students when they enter kindergarten, that they are ready, and anything that the district can do in that preparation, we're committed to expanding that. The second issue we have, as it relates to COVID-19, we have our task force that we will be laying out, and I will be providing more information tomorrow night at the board meeting. And we will be divided up into working groups with recommendations coming back to our cabinet team to move forward. So those are two great things that the mayor and others are bringing up, and we are listening and we are planning for pre-K, and to make sure that we're going to address all of those COVID recommendations. We received a template recently from a draft template from ODE. And so we are just waiting to tomorrow to have another conversation with cabinet and to move forward with that. But thank you for bringing both of those concerns to our attention.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. And thanks for bringing that issue from the mayor's office. Very important for us to obviously consider. I think the next part of the meeting is really going to get into a discussion. I think so far we've had two recommendations. One of those two of those recommendations we thought we would end up combining into one. So Stan, I'm going to turn it over to you to see what other discussion points we need to have as we as we plan to discuss those recommendations that we've got before us.
Okay, thank you. Just as a quick recap of where we've been over the past two meetings. The very first meeting, it was Alex Trevino and me doing a presentation on school funding overview briefly and our budgeting process. We framed this whole discussion in three budget buckets, being operational, the life cycle replacement, and facility master plan buckets. We talked to you about the facility master plan, what that process looks like, and the length of time it takes to conduct an update to the facility master plan. And then we spent even more time, I think, on our life cycle replacement issues. Gave you an update on an example, a great example of life cycle replacement, which was Operation Fix It, that was associated with the 2016 bond issue and permanent improvement levy. And then at our very last meeting, you heard from Dr. Dixon and her team about 21st century learning in Columbus schools and what it takes, what that is envisioned to look like. And most specifically, you heard about the technological upgrades that we need to support that, and really a change in culture, if you will, to view technology as a fundamental underlying piece of the educational environment. And so looking at that in a very different, again, change in culture way, that requires some form of permanent funding for that, like we would for any other really classroom item. So that gets us up to this point where we're open to discussion, amongst the committee members and with us. There's staff on board here to address any questions you might have. The goal is to finish the charge of this committee, and for you as a collective group to make a recommendation or several recommendations to the board. As the administration, we presented you with three. One was that there would be a permanent improvement levy placed on the November ballot in the amount of 4.5 mils to address the district's life cycle replacement needs. The other one came from the Dr. Dixon's team's presentation, and that is to place a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 0.2 mils on the November ballot to fund that technology plan. And then the third one was that the committee would recommend to the board to formally begin the process to update and renew the district's facility master plan with the goal of placing a bond issue on a future ballot, which will authorize the funding of the projects that are identified during that process. As Mr. Miller mentioned, if the committee chooses to do both the point two and the 4.5 permanent improvement levy, it would be recommended that they be combined, and the recommendation simply be that the board place a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils on the November general election ballot to fund the district's life cycle replacement needs and technology plan, or however we want to word that. But we would put those together. We would not put two separate issues on the ballot if the committee so chooses to go forth with both recommendations. So that's where we are now. We're at the point where I think we can, as best we can with what 14, 15 of us here, trying to have an open discussion. I suppose if you're on video, you could give us a wave and unmute yourself, and that will give Mr. Miller the opportunity to kind of control and identify who's next, or use the chat message to chat room there to kind of get in line, and we'll call on you as we go. Mr. Miller?
Thanks, Stan. I think you framed the issues pretty well. We had pretty robust discussions at both of the meetings, the two meetings that we had prior to this, about all of the issues and the recommendations. So first, I guess I would ask if anyone has any burning questions about any of the issues that needs further explanation about what those two issues are. Looks like John Caniglio, you got a question?
John, you've muted yourself.
There you go.
Sorry. So what, 4.5 mils, what specific things do you plan on doing with that money for capital improvements? Are you looking at like doing capital improvements to cause or some other buildings, or is this just go into a fund and you decide is that when the time comes, what it's going to be used for?
Well, there's a long list of eligible items. Trying to recall my presentation on that, but the school bus replacement is one. There are electrical, plumbing. It's very similar to Operation Fix It. HVAC upgrades, electrical, plumbing, security issues, ongoing life cycle equipment replacements, vehicle replacements. There's, the folks over in facilities have a list of projects that are standing by for funding. We would have the opportunity with that revenue stream to do some major permanent improvements to buildings, depending upon how what the progress is on the facility master plan. But we could pick certain projects off to work on there. So kind of like you said, as things come up and they become high urgency items, we could choose to add them to that list. But I believe the last number I heard from facilities and operations was around 500 million in deferred maintenance type items that we're going to begin to work down. But to tell you exactly which schools in which month and what time, I'm not able to do that. As soon as, when we get that funding in line, I'm sure that they'll begin to queue those things up. I don't know who else is here. That is Maurice here or Alex? I don't.
I'm here, Stan.
Oh, there we go. Can you give us some idea of how you work off of that long list and prioritize them?
Absolutely. You actually covered it, but it's life cycle replacement based on the $500 million deferred maintenance life cycle replacement schedule. In those projects, there's work that needs to be done. For example, like electrical gear shift upgrades. There's also other type of infrastructure and learning environment work that needs to be done. And what we do is we look at, based on the facilities index score of the facilities, and look at scheduling those projects, but also coordinating in tandem. If we're moving forward with a facilities master plan, you coordinate the schedule in conjunction with the facilities master plan, because again, what you want to do, you still have to maintenance and maintain the building, but you also want to keep it up in an excellent learning environment. until we get to replacing the building. So it's all goes tandem, hand in hand as far as how we schedule that. But you cover the items, Stan, as we continue to move forward with that.
So what we're planning on doing is putting 4.5 mils for the life cycle replacement and to take care of some of those needs like buses and things like that. And then we were also going to try to form a committee to explore a bond issue that for the facilities plan. They kind of sound like one and the same.
The big difference is on the facility master plan, these are much larger, like whole building reconstruction projects, as opposed to going into a building and upgrading electrical or upgrading the HVAC systems that you can do a piece at a time. The facility master plan is more designed around looking at particular schools and the configuration of schools and working hand in hand with the OFCC, Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, in terms of identifying, if you can recall previous bond issues, they had segments, which buildings were going to be done over time. So they're going to segment that out. But those are very large projects. This is where you'll hear Alex talk about the need for swing space sometimes when you have to move kids out of a building so you can go in and renovate it, and you move for a year and come back a year later. Those are the really big projects. Not that the permanent improvement issues aren't that big, but they aren't necessarily a complete overhaul of a building. So it's really a magnitude issue. Does that help, John?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And John, why it goes hand in hand, and this has been some of the struggle since 2016, since we weren't actively working on a facility master plan. You put the facilities folks in a precarious situation. Think about a roof. We may have a building that really needs to go through a complete renovation, but the roof is in disrepair and it needs to be replaced now. And we don't know, are we going to replace that building in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? And without that facility master plan, it really makes that decision difficult, because what we don't want to do is put a new roof on a building and 2 years later, maybe it's a building that needs to be, demolished and rebuilt. Sometimes HVAC upgrades are better done when you can really work through an entire building and upgrade the entire interior of the building and kind of reconstruct it so that you put in that system more efficiently and effectively, as opposed to just going in and doing something with the existing internal structure. So they have to work hand in hand. And so when we have that long-term plan in place, it really helps with that annual, every year kind of a process of what projects do we want to do now that will fit well in that overall longer-term facility master plan.
And also, Stan, if I can add, one of the things to keep in mind on a facility master plan, you're putting up a new structure. In the PI dollars, what you're looking at is to maintenance the building over time. Every piece of equipment have a life cycle to it. For example, if you think of a chiller, it might have a useful life. And in that useful life in all the buildings, you want to start planning accordingly with a capital funded, so that when that life cycle comes up, you have planning to be able to replace or address those issues. And one of the challenges has been over time is we didn't have capital allows to be able to plan those. So then what happens is those items goes into deferred maintenance. To be simple as carpet, it needs to be replaced maybe on a 5 or 10 year cycle. When you got chillers, you have windows. And so that's the reason why it's important to be able to have a capital to be able to schedule life cycle replacement as well.
Committeewoman Lois Carson, she has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So would we start with a new facility master plan, or would we pick up with the previous one that we had, as well as, because the previous one stated some work that needed to be done if we were going to keep the buildings up or if we were going to replace them. So would we start from scratch with a facility master plan, as well as would we start from scratch of the deferred maintenance plan? And how will we prioritize? Because when we did the previous facility master plan, we had a long list of items and criteria why they would fall in a replacement plan.
Multiple parts to your question, Lois, and if I don't get to all of them, you remind me. Do we start over on the facility master plan? My answer to that is no. We did an update back in 2016 and didn't get quite done with it in that 6-month period that we spent on it. So it's my understanding that well, I refer to this as a restart, kind of a renew and refresh of that plan, and then finish the work in terms of addressing all of the K-12 buildings in the district. So no, we would not discard the previous work. We would take a look at that, update it, renew it, and then move forward and finish some of the work and some of the buildings that weren't addressed in that 2016. And in fact, that was an update to the original facility master plan. As far as the deferred maintenance, I think you asked, would we start over? And I would say no. Maurice could speak to that. They've got an active list of deferred maintenance items, so there's no need to start over on that. They're ready to go with that list. Am I right, Maurice?
Yes, you're correct. And if I can add on, the facilities master plan wouldn't be a start over, but it would be resetting to make sure the facilities master plan aligns with the strategic plan of the district and towards the classroom as we move forward. And we got to keep in mind, as things are continually change, we have a plan that's in place, but we also have to make sure it ties into the academic service side, as well as how we're going to educate our youngsters into moving forward. So again, it's not a start over, it's an enhanced. Keep in mind, a facilities master plan is very fluid. It's never finished. And you're always looking and working in how you keep moving forward with the facilities master plan.
And at the end of Dr. Dixon's presentation, she had that video of that school building. And, the idea behind a facilities master plan is that you don't design the academic program to fit a building, you design a building to fit the academic plan. And that's what's so important about this facility master plan and why it's important to get it started so that it's timed right as Dr. Dixon and her team roll out that vision. So am I right, Dr. Dixon? Am I helping you?
Yes, I was not in my head. I was going to chime in, but you're absolutely right. So I think Lois, is the opportunity to kind of do both. Just kind of go back and look at what was there prior. But, we always have to be mindful that we're envisioning schools for tomorrow kids, not for kids of today. To that video, to that point, when we think about even our pre-K students and how do we envisioning their teaching and their learning space to be, I think it gives us an opportunity to go back to the portrait of the graduate, the visioning work that we were doing with the community and listening to the community and saying, this is what we want. For example, I recall one of the meetings and a parent said, why aren't we teaching our students foreign language from kindergarten? And when all of our students enter kindergarten, every student has access to, must be a part of a foreign language program, right? So how do we, what does that look like for the future of our students? And what does that mean for our building design? And how do we make sure that we got kids from different cultures that are learning together, different languages? So it is an opportunity, but I agree. I think listening and taking some points from those visioning exercises for our community, that will, I think, allow us to envision what our schools of tomorrow will look like. And I believe even now with this COVID-19 global pandemic, we know for certain that they will look different. And so we have a wonderful opportunity to co-design that together in the Columbus community. So thank you. Great question, Lois.
So thank you. Yeah, Philip, why don't you turn your mic on and jump in?
Yes, sir. Okay, just wanted to just clarify. Can you clarify one more time, make sure we all on the same page, that this update to the 2016 Facility Master Plan is also included in the 4.5. Also, another question that was asked of me from another individual when we talk about the three separate buckets, the operational life cycle and the facility master plan, in the operational, is that also including the staffing and materials for staff?
Okay, so see if I get both pieces of your question. First of all, the 4.5 mils that are recommended for life cycle replacement are separate from the recommendation relative to starting up the facility master plan. That facility master plan, once completed and recommendations come out of that, will result in a bond issue being placed on the ballot to approve the long-term funding needed to fund those large capital expenditures. The 4.5 mils is an ongoing funding source that we will use on an annual basis to do those life cycle replacements. In essence, you go do the facility master plan, and you pass a bond issue, and you issue debt for 25 years, and that bond issue is, the levy, the tax levy is on the duplicate for 25 years, and then it goes away. The PI levies, though, are there for that ongoing, because these buildings will be with us, and some of ours have been with us for 100 years. That PI levy needs to be there to fund the ongoing upkeep of those buildings. And so that PI levy will be there every year to help fund that and provide what we need to do those life cycle replacements. So they are distinctly related. You do the FMP and do a bond issue to build your building, and then you need permanent improvement levy money that's ongoing and continuous to help with the care and upkeep of that building. Here's an interesting thing on the FMP deals. The state of Ohio requires districts to pass at least a $500,000 levy in order to receive the state funding. So we did that originally back with the previous FMP and bond issues that we put in place prior to now. Interestingly enough, the $500,000 levy, you don't have to redo it every time. Now that we passed one, we qualify. But clearly you can see that a $500,000 is not nearly enough to maintain those buildings. But conceptually, even the state understood, hey, we'll help you build this, but you have to have funding in place to maintain them. And those dollars are in fact the ones we have now. That PI levy is very separate and can only be used on those buildings wherein the state had helped co-fund those buildings. So that's how those two pieces work. On the operational side, what we talked about at the end of the presentation last week was about the technology upgrades and needs for that new visioning of how technology fits into the programming. And that was strictly, the hard cost of equipment. It was the initial purchase, annual kind of repair and refresh, and then every 5 years in the plan is a complete refresh of those technology items. Does that help you, Mr. Callaway?
Yes, but I just want to clarify. So the operational part that you was referring to, that's the point 2. And so in the 4.5, the operational is not on the forefront. It's more life cycle and facility master plan, correct?
Yeah, the 4.5 is life cycle. The 0.2 is recommended for the technology upgrades. And all of that is segregated and reserved for those types of capital expenditures. None of that is designed around the true operational expenses of salaries and wages, utilities, fuel, things like that, supplies and materials. The PI levies, the permanent improvement levies, are not for that. They are specifically for permanent improvements, items with a life longer than a year and of a fairly sizable dollar amount.
John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so with the staffing piece, you know, is there a reason why we do not want to include language that would go towards hiring, attracting, and retaining more personnel? Is there a reason why we don't want to do that?
Well, the staffing piece would come through an operating levy. That's a different type of levy. And at this point, obviously what we presented was all capital related. And then I think the staffing piece fits better with Dr. Dixon's visioning process. So I'd let her speak to that. Because certainly I'm at some point in time, depending upon what that programmatic plan looks like, there will be inevitably a need for operating millage as well. Maybe not now, but certainly in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Stan. Yes, John, great question. But this, what we decided was I wanted to make sure that we completed the portrait of a graduate process. Remember, that's that visioning process that we've been doing with the community. So when we talk about what does a Columbus City School graduate look like, and what are the education experiences that we want them to have, that planning is still taking shape. And then we also, remember, we have a lot of information we received from our recent Phi Delta Kappa curriculum management audit. And then the last thing we're going to do is our strategic planning a process that will start this fall. So it was very important to me that we, one, understood what our students need right now. Two, we understood what the community as a whole would commit to and their desires to make sure that we are educating our students, again, for tomorrow, not today's students, but tomorrow's students. And three, wanted to make sure that we have the capacity to do it and do it with excellence. So I thought we needed more time to do that. We needed more time to do that and do that with excellence. But the second piece is that right now we understand that technology is going to be the lever for the future of our students. And we have some inequities that we have to address in our district. And I believe, and we believe, that one of those is students' access to technology, and that needed to be a part of the academic program. So when you think about our permanent improvement, and as we improve our school buildings, it's important that we improve their access to technology, making sure that as students come into a school building, they access a desk and a chair and a computer. That becomes a part of that's their learning tool, and we provide access to our students that. So we will come back, you know, when we have that long-term vision, and then when we have that long-term vision, we will be able to answer your question. And how do we approach funding, additional funding that will perhaps be needed for the long-term vision of educating Columbus City School students.
So the 0.2 mils would cover the funding for the technology, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we speak about equity, and I guess, you know, the reason why I bring up attracting and retaining and hiring new personnel is because there is a lot of inequity in Columbus City schools, and our kids need as much support as possible. And that's where I was thinking that here we had an opportunity to, you know, support our kids in different ways. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We have a question from Eva, committee member. Eva, you want to ask us your question now, or ask a clarifying question?
I do. So my question is, so this committee, the Millage Committee, is just putting everything out there of what we need, right? Like why we need the money and what it is that we'd like to put it towards. But then there will be another committee that actually decides where that money is really going. Is that what's actually happening? That this is kind of like you're going to the bank and saying, hey, we need this money. This is our business plan. But then like you have a whole another committee that, or maybe the board does this, that says, oh, this is actually where we're going to use that money. Is that right?
The proposed permanent improvement levies, those dollars go into a capital budgets that decided annually. There's not a committee. They already have a long list of projects that are ready to go. That's not going to be done by committee. It's going to go for all those types of items that we've talked about. That list may change from year to year. Quite frankly, that's changed based upon the administration and their preparation of budgets that they submit to the board for approval. So no, the PI money is not spent by committee. Where the committee comes into play is with the long-term facility master plan. That's where we form a committee. You usually have a facilitator. If you can recall, in 2016, we had several community meetings to talk about what goes into that plan. And that's the mechanism, that sort of committee, community meeting forum type structures that will then formulate the plan for how we go about the major renovations and changes to the building structures. Does that help you?
Yeah, so right now, really, everything that you've laid out, we just need to say, oh yeah, we agree with this idea or not. Is that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it sound like we're hashing things out that aren't, I just want to make sure that like, we're not trying to get down to the nitty gritty, where's everything going? We want to say, hey, this is our overall plan. Do we approve of this idea as a whole? Is that what we're doing?
That is exactly correct, yes.
Okay,
So
I just wanted to make sure that I had that right.
No, thank you for the question. Thanks for clarifying. At the first committee meeting we had, I think they went through a pretty detailed capital plan, and that's where the 4.5 mil piece of this came from. It's about $45 million a year in shortfall that we're facing as a district right now, just to do the repairs, replacements, and all the things that are necessary for us to do today. And so that was detailed a lot in the first minute. And we also had all of those minutes in the PowerPoint from that sent out from that first meeting. So everybody should have also gotten that. It may have been difficult to understand after the meeting, but you're correct in your assumption.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, any other questions, any other thoughts about the 4.5 or the 0.2 and how we actually get to the 4.7 there? Sean, go ahead. Whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah. NJ, you'll go after Sean, okay?
Stan, I think this is a question for you. Based on your calculations, we saw that we could get to the $45 million at about 4.3 mils plus, right? So 4.3 and change. And when I was thinking about that, with 4.3 and change, what we proposed 4.5, I guess my question is, if we're proposing 4.5, couldn't we just roll Dr. Dixon's 0.2 into our 4.3, and our recommendation is 4.5 instead of 4.7? I just need some clarification on that.
Yeah, there was some rounding going on in the calculations. The 0.2 was a little shy, and the 4.5 was a little long, and
Okay.
the 4.7 fits real well. So you are, it's funny. You're right on point. Yeah, I rounded up to get to the 4.5 because really this is, this may be it for a while.
Okay.
And our costs right now are how we see them in 2020 dollars. And it'd be great for the district to have a little wiggle room so that if we're never back for PI money for another 10 years, that we can absorb some inflationary costs. But you are absolutely correct. If you wanted to do 4 point, this isn't like surgery right now, being that precise, but you are correct. But when I put the 0.2 out there, I later looked at it and went, I probably should have said, 0.3. Again, because that's based upon an estimate now of 25 million to do a complete refresh, a couple of million every year to keep it going, and then another 25 million. And I did that over 10 years and divided it out. And it's a little bit, you're correct though, but
no, you're fine, Stan. I just, I'm a numbers guy, so I wanted clarification. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, good for you. You're spot on.
Takes a CFO to find those kind of points difference between point 1 and point 2 there. So good call out. We've got a question in the chat, but before we do that, Inja, would you ask your question?
Yes, thank you. This question is for Dr. Dixon. I know we are talking about, I hear you keep emphasizing the kids for tomorrow, the kids in the future. I think your presentation, or maybe you spoke about picturing the class of 2033. But if this is passed, what about the kids of today? Like, how soon can they be affected by what we're doing today? Not just the kindergartners, but our 5th graders, our 10th graders, you know what I mean? So I don't want to dismiss them because they are still in school and they still need the same things that the kids of the future will need. So I wanted to know how they will be pulled into it so that they can get some of the benefit for the decisions that we're making today.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, and thank you for highlighting that. One of the things is how we're using technology right now. And so we've learned a lot just recently by, one, making sure our students all have access to a tablet or a computer outside the class day, right? So right now we're set up that students walk into our school buildings and have access to a computer just during their school day. But if for some reason they need something after school, they would even have to borrow one in order to take that device home for assistance. We believe that that student, as a future student, need that as a book, as a staple, as a part of their curriculum, rather. So in the fall, we want to be able to give a device to our students and not have to loan devices out. So in the short term, we're looking at a way to do that. We're looking at ways that teachers can stay in touch with our students 24 hours if needed. So learning doesn't begin at 8 and ends at 4. And if our teachers or another of social emotional learning or something that our students or parents need, it is available after school. So our teachers are coming up with different learning platforms. We're expanding our curriculum. Our new curriculum that we're purchasing, our ELA and our math curriculum will have will allow us to use more online learning modules for our students. So we're going to be able to use all of those creative lessons that our teachers have been using these last 6 to 8 weeks and able to maximize those for our students, along with the new curriculum that we have recently purchased. So very good question. I don't want to leave out, thank you for bringing it to my attention. We don't want to leave out today's students. And those are some of the things that we are providing for them. And it's pretty awesome because right now our students are doing some amazing things. And we see it all over the United States. Our students are creating things at home because they're at home and they have access to technology to be creative. And we want to make sure our students, starting this fall, have some means and access to technology as we think through this next steps for this opportunity that we're talking about now. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. We have another question in chat, and then I have a question after that. So Lourdes, you want to ask your question?
Yes. Can you give me a little civics refresher here on, so with the levy, can we talk about the timing of the levy versus a bond issue? And then if for some reason, because my assumption is that the levy will go on the ballot this fall, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the bond issue, would that same or no?
That's not part of the recommendation. The recommendation that would impact a bond issue has to do with recommending to the board that they start that facility master plan process. So after that process of planning and evaluating and creating that whole plan, once that's done, You look at the dollar amount that's needed to execute that plan, and that's the bond issue that would come on a subsequent ballot. So depending on how long it takes us to get through that, does it come up next year? Does it come up in 2 years? A bond issue isn't in the works for this fall.
Got it. And then my follow-up question. So if we do not feel like this is the right time for the levy, right, for whatever reason, you know, just I'm thinking about the last levy issue that we had up, and you know, there was a lot of work to educate folks about about the importance of it, and it was a fight to kind of push it through. And I'm just thinking about where we are economically, the effects of COVID. If we are in a place where we're concerned about the levy issue being on for this fall, when would be the next opportunity then?
We have a couple of different ballot options in 21. I don't know all those dates off the top of my head, but you have several options.
Okay.
And, you know, if you take one of the things I would hope that everyone on the committee and anyone who listens to the presentation takes away from my discussion in the first meeting about the flow of dollars from a voted issue is that, you know, we're really planning for 18 to 24 months down the road when we have these discussions. You know, this issue goes on in November. It's first collected in January of 21. So you're in the middle of a school year. And I think the previous question was, what about the kids of today? And I think about, well, how does this impact fiscal year 21 activities? It just doesn't much. Now, yes, we'll get money in January. We don't know until the 1st of December that the issue has passed and has been certified to us. So could we access those funds, finance some things up front? Sure, but you're in the middle of the school year. So at that point, you know, we're starting planning for 22 fiscal year. So that what I think the takeaway for everyone should be is that, you know, you really have to plan ahead to fund your educational system, because it takes a while to get it on the ballot and then get the taxes collected. And you're 12 to 18 months from having that financial impact. That's why I take our 5-year forecast and really make it an 8-year. I want you to look at it over 8 years so that, you know, we can't wait until 2024 to do certain things. We have to provide that funding. And then we all struggle with, well, what are you going to spend the money on? Do you have a plan? Well, we do have a long list of permanent improvement needs. You know, academically, that plan is being developed. So I know everybody doesn't want to fund something that isn't planned, but it's hard to plan when you don't have the funding. It almost becomes a chicken and an egg question. So if nothing else, you know, these types of conversations have to be ongoing. And we do that at our FAC meeting. And when we look at the 5-year forecast, and should we put this issue on the ballot and it passes, I'm sure that capital budgeting and those plans on an annual basis will be a hot topic at the FAC Finance and Appropriations Committee meetings. So it's exciting, but just take away that we really have to look well enough and, you know, far enough in advance in order to provide the funding to support all the needs that we have: academic needs, facility needs, staffing needs, all of that. You can't decide in September what you need for that year and come up with the dollars to do that.
And I appreciate that. I think especially, I think school funding is super complex, and it's super complex for people to understand the process. And so I appreciate you breaking that down, because I think especially for people who are watching this meeting or go back and watch this meeting, I think it's important for them to have that perspective, because I think it feels as if, you know, if something is passed and it's happening because the dollars are coming out, that the dollars are going directly in, and that's not how the process happens. And so I think without really understanding that, I think it's just, I think it gives people perspective to think about how difficult the process is, you know, for giving kids what it is that they need and giving our school system what it is that they need. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, and I'll tell you what, interesting thing, I did get a phone call from a person that's involved in school finance, and they said to me, she says, Stan, so tell me, when I pay my mortgage and my taxes are embedded in that, when do you get that money? And so even that, just when I pay my mortgage payment and my taxes are escrowed, how does that flow to me as the recipient? How does it flow to the district as a recipient of tax dollars? So it can be kind of confusing. So that's a great question. I think you also said something about if you decide not to go on the ballot this November for whatever reason, when's our next time? And there's kind of a saying on my side of the table: there's never a good time for a tax levy, right? And I understand the difficult times that we're in. But 3 months ago, I would have said to you the same thing I'd say to you right now. And that is, from my perspective as a finance guy in public education, I think it's important to ask for what you need to run the program that you believe your community, your parents, and your children need. You need to ask and not presuppose what the community would approve from a funding standpoint. You can differ with me on that. I do know this: you never get what you don't ask for.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the one to tell you, oh, this is a bad time to go, and then we realize that maybe it was, and we don't get to do something a year from now because of that. So you'll always hear me. I want to ask, but that's me, and I'm just one. And that's why we have you as a committee.
That's right. And that's a great question. And I think it's something that everybody thought of. It's the elephant in the room, right? I mean, we know it's a difficult time. We know it's challenging. And like Stan said, there is no easy time to go ask people $45 million a year, even if it is their children. But the one thing I'd like to clarify also is that our recommendation tonight will be to the school board. And then the school board will really have the tough decision as to if they want to bring that issue up for this year's ballot or a future year. So I think what we try to do in these meetings is really try to get to the number that we need. And that was probably most of that was done at that first meeting when we went through a detailed analysis of the budget. And Stan had that waterfall showing when the district is going to run out of funds and what happens if we don't start replacing those funds sooner rather than later. So that was that issue, but great question. I know a lot of folks will have that ongoing. We have a question from Mike Jones, committee member. So Mike,
thank you.
You want to turn your mic on?
Thank you. And thank you to the staff, everybody that has participated and put in all of the hard work to create the presentations that you have. They've been very impressive. Thank you, Stan, for the continued conversation that you've had with me, helping me to walk through some of these things. And thank you, Jordan, for just making that comment, because I am where I was on a fence a moment ago. You just made a great point. It's not our job to, and clarify for me, it's not our job to make a decision what goes where, when, how, but more, is this the number that is justified for a levy? And if that is exclusively our role and responsibility here, I can certainly say, yes, that number is supported. Where I do have some challenges, however, are where we are, these current conditions. I think there's a great opportunity for us. Right now, everybody's kind of going through the same thing, economically, socially, and otherwise. So I think we all have a unique opportunity, especially as a school system, to emerge from this in a very unique way. And I want to make sure that we're thinking as a committee, as a school board, as staff, how do we emerge from this most successfully? And I think that there needs to be some more thought. I'd like to participate in that additional thought. One of our committee members at our first meeting mentioned, what does the classroom look like? And not just like Dr. Dixon had described with just the technology, et cetera, but physically, what does it look like? What are the number of people? Are we moving more towards a different mode of educating our children? I don't feel like any of that's been part of this discussion. School sizes, school consolidation, and anytime I look to justify going to ask for money, I like to look at the big picture. And to an earlier point that was made, we're looking at snapshots, rather than just big picture. And I understand why, but I feel more comfortable if it's my decision to say, let's move forward with the levy, which I understand it may not be. I'd say we do it next year, and we do it with a more thoughtful, some additional thought going into it, in addition to what you guys already have, that looks at this big picture, that looks at a different way of learning, alternatively, from what we've had in the past and what we know will be needed for the future. And without that, I just feel like we're missing some components, and I'd certainly like to be sure we're dealing with those. With what I do every day, I help people buy and sell real estate. And I can't tell you the last person that I met that said, I want to move into the Columbus City School District. It's quite the opposite. So there's an opportunity to demonstrate that we can be a superior school district, not just in numbers and comparison in Ohio, if that's the case, but making people proud and want to be a part of the Columbus City school system. That's it.
I think you make a great point. Is there someone that wants to respond to that?
Chair, this is Committee Member Klein, and to Committee Member Jones's point, I am on the same page in many ways, in that I'm comfortable saying this is the number, but I am not comfortable making a recommendation to the board about their process and what they should do when. The resolution is drafted actually dictates that they would that our recommendation is to put it on the November 2020 ballot. And that makes me less than comfortable in not leaving that decision to the board based upon their representativeness to, for the community. They're elected to make those decisions. We were just appointed to make a recommendation. So I think that Committee Member Jones makes a great point. I'm comfortable up to a point, that point being the number. I'm less comfortable when it comes to making a recommendation on what the board should do when. And then also on the facility master plan, I just wanted to clarify, I had a slightly different experience as a member of that facility master committee. It was not the committee that did not complete its work. The board made a decision to not move forward with the high school plan. We had talked about high schools and that just never went anywhere. So I think that committee did do its work. I just wanted to say that because the point was made that that committee had not finished its work at one point. But as I recall, we did make a recommendation to the board in 2016.
Thank you. Jim, you had a question? Jim Negron?
Yeah, so point of clarification. For us, when we make this recommendation on the amount and then going on the ballot in November, will the board potentially change the amount or change the date? That's my first question.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, we are just a community body making a recommendation. So the amount and the date will be completely vetted by the board for which we voted in.
We have several board members on this dais here, and I would have to say that they will be vetting whatever. They vet everything I bring to them. So
yep.
you can
and the only reason, only reason I said that was just to a point of clarity, because when you were going through the numbers, you could have asked for more money and we could have justified those numbers. So you were on the low end of what you could have justified. I'm a builder and we build into suburban districts and I watch what they do. And, this is a point of clarity because for me, your physical structures should match the quality of institution, right? So I personally have experience with working with the district on a very intimate level, working on, the school closing, right? So I got to see the quality of people. There's, of course, people don't understand the challenges on a large urban inner city school district. And what happens is the information gets caught up in news and bad messaging and negative messaging, and the true message about what's happening never really gets out. And the question of when's a good time, I can't remember if Jordan or Stan, you said it, there never is a good time. What we are doing is saying the information you put in front of us, we are like, okay, yes, that's reasonable, that's acceptable to us, and we feel good enough to say, yes, what you did, what you put together in front of us, we agree with, and we think it's responsible to move forward. But the further vetting and further investigating is going to be done by the board. So that was I know there's a lot that I said there, but and I apologize for mixing so much up, but this is a really passionate subject, and it really gets convoluted and misconstrued, and people really misunderstand what it takes to educate in an large inner city district. And what we're talking about here is different than that. It's building facilities and infrastructure to be able to support the educational aspects of that. But that's my simplistic way of putting it. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I think you raised a great comment there, Jim. And just like all the other comments, that's really what this meeting is for, to raise and debate those comments and to determine what we want to recommend to the school board. And then I'll just ask either Jennifer or Michael Cole's also on the call to make a comment about how they view this part of the input in their decision making.
Thank you, Jordan. My connection is really bad, so I hope you can hear me. You guys, as I started off with in the first meeting, you are not a rubber stamp. We take this input very seriously. You each represent people in our community, and all of this discussion is very helpful to the large tasks the board has to do going forward. And so everything, I'm taking copious notes, and I know board members are paying attention and listening to you. And so it is helpful. And so I would ask that if any of you have additional comments, don't be afraid. Say what you feel. Say what the people that you hear, hear from are saying to you. Because it's important in how we represent you and our children going forward. Board Member Cole, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, committee colleagues, so much for providing us the insight that you shared with us. I can most assuredly say, having gone through this a few times, that your thoughts, your comments, your concerns are taken very, very seriously. That's just a backup to what Madam President said. This is something that we deliberate on and take additional steps to find out what public appetite may be for it, what our appetite may be for it, how viable it is, being clear about what the administration is or isn't asking for. So, for example, this recent comment from Mr. Smido on behalf of the mayor, asking that we give consideration to pre-K in this process, and how we very quickly and duly responded and saying that this is a priority. And as we have our ongoing planning conversations around what education looks like, what the portrait of a graduate is that encapsulates pre-K through 12, that is a part of that dialogue. Buildings and the conversation around bricks and mortar also play a significant role in that conversation. as you have visualize what a public school education in Columbus City Schools is to offer for future students, you also have to plan around those spaces. It's again what even Mr. Negron alluded to as well in what he stated. At the end of the day, this is, as you said, Ms. Klein, a very tough decision that we'd all have to make. It is one where you are not a rubber stamp. It is one where you are every bit of important to this process. And this is why we took and went through the more than year-long effort to ensure that this committee was put together with a group of people who were really community connected, understood our students, understood what the challenges could be coming from the community, and understood how to help us think that through. So without being too long, I hope I've answered that question.
No, I think you have. I think one of the things when we back up, we were going to start in-person meetings about a month earlier than we actually started. And I think I do have to think we did miss some interaction opportunities. A chance to, those interactive meetings are sometimes just better because you can read body language and content, you can interact, you can have sidebar questions, and you can get into more detail and sometimes a deeper understanding. And I think Zoom takes some of that away. That's not to belittle any of the information that's been provided by the treasurer or by the Superintendent Dixon. All of that required us, I think, as committee members to do a deeper dive offline, to review those packages, to try to understand what they're doing, because I think that ultimately they are the stewards. I mean, they're the ones that have the best school, and we all have the school interests in mind, but and they're overseen by our board. But they're the ones that are in a day-to-day, and they're the ones that are presenting the information to us. So that's just another comment I'll make. One of the other things I wanted to clarify too, we proposed 4.5. Joe, Ellen, I see your question. I'll get you in just a second. We have $4.5 million piece, and then we have a 0.2. So we were planning to vote on a $4.7 million in total, and that 0.2 won't be segregated out. Is there another crack at this, Stan, that we would look at this differently, or is that what we're asking?
Well, my role in this was to present the need and quantify that, and help you understand issues around, scope and timing, and make what I think is the best recommendation. And then it's up to you. So you might decide that, well, as Mr. Grant pointed out, you might decide, look, let's just go for 4.5 and please make it work, fit the technology piece in there. And so you have the opportunity to craft this resolution any way you want. And I've got the pieces and parts here to share and work on it with you. So this is your crack at this to say what you want to say as a result of your deliberations as a committee.
Okay, we'll go to Joe Ellen next, and then we'll get back to that conversation.
Chairman Miller?
Yes.
Thank you. If I may, just very quickly. And us as the Columbus City School Board of Education, deliberating on whatever comes from the committee, please understand that, and this is just me speaking for Michael, it is Michael speaking for Michael. Please understand that not only do we take this into consideration from the standpoint of what we're looking out to possibly see what's coming, we know that this opportunity not just has implications for the future. I know Ms. Padilla asked about, well, no, it wasn't her, it was Ms. Njai asked about, what about now? Well, this money serves an emergent and important need now. When you're talking about replacement of life cycle, assets, when you're talking about technology and investing in that at a time where we know from an academic standpoint, we're about to seriously pick up moving that ball down the road very quickly and building capacity that's needed for our students to provide equity, to provide everything that they need that's essential. This does play an important role. This will be the part of the conversation that we carry on as your 7 elected members to figure out what's the best process moving forward. I just wanted to let you know that the need is emergent. As much as we're looking down the road, there is emergent need, an emerging need for these dollars. And again, this is Michael speaking for Michael.
I understand it's going to be 7 Michaels in that room with all different voices.
It's going to be 7 people, 1 Michael.
Well, I mean, it's thanks for that clarification. I think it's important for us to know that. And I'll ask Joelle, she had a question to jump in.
Sure. So my question is for Stan, really. I'm sure that you read some articles in the Columbus Dispatch about the possibility of delaying the triennial update of property values to 2021. How would that delay in a value assessment impact your numbers?
Typically, the certification comes in based upon the duplicate in hand. So right now, the duplicate that we have in hand is tax year 19 for collection in 20. And we'll do our certifications in August. And I'm pretty sure that that'll be done against that duplicate. So back to the conversation with Mr. Grant, 4.5 mils times a duplicate generates a certain dollar amount. When that duplicate for 20 is set as of January 20, when that duplicate is set and the tax bills are issued after this levy passes, then it's going to be set to generate the dollars, not the mills. So if there is a large increase in the duplicate come January 1 of 2020 that we don't know about until November and December when they're setting the tax rates, that 4.5 will be rolled back. And it'll only be levied at the level in order to generate, using rounded numbers, Mr. Grant. If it generates $10 million now, it's going to generate $10 million tomorrow. Now, the one thing about the delay in the duplicate in doing that triennial update, one of the issues that it does kind of present that's not terribly favorable is that the limited amount of growth that a school district, and this is any school district, would get based upon inflationary increases in the duplicate. As I tried to explain in the first meeting, for the vast majority of our millage, we're subject to the House Bill 920 reduction factor, which, as I just explained, any levy you put on is really to generate a certain number of dollars, and as valuation goes up, the millage is reduced so that the product of those two multipliers is the same. Not so with inside millage. Inside millage is 10 mils on all property in the state, real property in the state. It's a constitutional levying of property taxes, and that is not subject to the reduction factor. So those 10 mils on the inside, of which we get 4.51, does rise and generate additional dollars over time. That's really only maybe 10% of our total millage. So if you get a 10% increase in 10% of your millage, you get about maybe a 1% increase in tax revenues. And you can see that in my forecast when I say it only climbs at maybe 1.5 or 2% over time. If that, that's that inside millage behavior. So when you delay setting that duplicate until a later year, you're not allowing school districts, all of them, to benefit from that inside millage calculation. So if tax year 20's duplicate is identical to tax year 19, inside millage generates the same amount of dollars. And as we were planning years ago, Years ago, as we looked in our 5-year forecast, planning that every 3 years there's a bump because of that inflationary growth and on inside millage. Now that's not going to happen. That's reducing revenue for school districts. And is it a large amount? Not necessarily, but it is something that we planned on. It is something that's in the forecast. And I think I spoke earlier about, right now, more than ever, I have a sheet that's got 2 columns on it, good things and bad things. And I got way too many things in the bad things column. Rising expenses, unknown structure of school in the fall, we had a state reduction in state aid. I don't know what the reduction in state aid for FY21 is going to be. And every day I hear, different estimates of what and guesses what that might be. We've delayed the property tax collection to August. So knowing what that collection is going to be like now, instead of knowing in August, I might not know until October what that is. So I'm expecting that will be down by how much, I don't know, but information is important to me right now. We're in such a state of uncertainty. I need some tangible things I can build a plan on and I can count on. And right now I'm not getting them. So to your question, that delay, yeah, I think I want to rely on property values that are as accurate as they can be. And we have a whole process statutorily in terms of the Board of Revision for taxpayers and tax receivers alike to have those discussions, kind of have their day in court to hassle those items out. But a delay in not updating to what the true market value is of January 1, 2020, it doesn't help us. Now, it doesn't affect my number. I still need to generate, the dollars that I'm talking about. 4.5 mils. It's really the dollar amount I'm talking about, not necessarily the millage. Even though it goes on the ballot as millage, ultimately, it's computed based upon dollars. Long-winded answer.
Yeah, you have a way of losing everybody, I think.
Yeah.
So we've got a few questions in the chat. So I want to move to Eva first, and then we'll go to Lois, and then we'll go to NJ. Is that okay, Eva?
Yes. So my question is, when do you, and I feel like you said this in the first meeting, but I can't specifically remember. So the first part of my question is, when do you have to say that it's going to be on the ballot? Like, when is the end date to get it on the ballot for November? And then, and this is more of a comment that maybe I would say if we were all together, but I'm a pretty informed voter, and I feel like the difference between 4.2 or 4.7 or any of those numbers, to me, I wouldn't even blink to say, oh, is this, what exactly is the school board asking for at 4.7 mils? I would just, vote yes or no, one way or the other. It wouldn't be, I guess I'm a business owner, but also not really a great numbers person. And so one second, please. I'm sorry. I'm not, I guess mostly I just think that I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. I have a tiny person that came in my room. The difference between just the 4.2 or the 4.7 or 4.5, I guess it's all the same, to me. And I guess that was a very long-winded thing to say, but that was all.
I think that's I think we're all on the same page there. That was just to try to reconcile the two different components that we were putting together. And I think the question was asked at the last meeting. Could you pull out the 0.2 from the overall amount and make sure that that's used specifically for technology improvements? And we couldn't put that on the ballot that way. And it would be up to our trust in the school board to make sure that happens. Lois, you have a question?
So Stan, what if, with all that's going on in the world, we're probably going to have some delinquent taxes. So how will that impact this? And I'm wishing on a star being a homeowner. Maybe a decision will come down with all that we've gone through that they're going to lower or defer the tax payment. So if all of that happens, how will that impact us putting this on the levy in November? Will the delinquent money ever catch up with us if taxpayers, because over the time they're going to become more and more delinquent? And then maybe this is not a question, maybe this is a comment. I understand that we are trusting that the board's going to review and oversee and make a recommendation about how the money is spent moving forward. But I do have to express that I represent a lot of members in the community that have concern about that, because on the last levy, we did building leverage work. And a lot of my members thought that some of that work was going to come to them. And a lot of that work was work that went out to outside contract companies. So I have to keep that on the front line, that if we're going to do some building improvements and some building repair and I understand the new builds are contracted, but some of the building maintenance work, a lot of it went out and it was not work that my members received. So that is a concern that they have, and keeping in mind that a lot of my members live in this district. So these are people I need to go back and try to encourage to support this levy. And the first thing they're going to say is, how am I going to benefit from it, Lois? So that's really not a question, the last part. That's just something I have to put out there on behalf of the members I represent. But the first two, and I know you got them, Stan, because I can look at your facial expression that you got them. So if you could give me the answer, I'd appreciate it.
Let's see if I can remember. First of all, you're talking about the potential for property taxes to go unpaid during this economic situation that we're facing. Whether they're current unpaid or they go delinquent, that's a technicality, but certainly the collections will likely be less. How does it affect what we're talking about right now? Well, because it gets voted in November, we don't have it this year anyway, during calendar year 20. It depending on how long this crisis lasts and how long it takes the economy to recovery, the question becomes, as you stated, what happens in the spring in February and March of 21? Will people still be facing some hardships economically, and will they not be able to pay their taxes? That's a distinct possibility, and what that means is that while we might levy $45 million, we might not collect all of that. And so what's the magnitude of that? I don't know. That's one of those unknowns that you can certainly model. I mean, if delinquencies go up 10% over what's typically anticipated, will that cost us potentially $4.5 million of uncollected taxes during the whole calendar year? Yeah, it could. It could. But it's so that's an unknown. You mentioned something about, will those taxes ever be paid, and they do become a lien on property, so eventually they are paid one way or the other. It may take a while, but they do ultimately get collected. I know. Remember, the last part of your collection was about contracting, doing the work in-house. Was there a question in between there that I missed? I think there's a question on the chat about timing. When does the board have to decide on the ballot issue? So the very last step in the process is done by the board. Will have to be done right the very first meeting in August. They don't meet in July. So we have several steps to go through in terms of adopting a resolution of necessity, and sending that information to the county auditor to get a certification back. And then we have to adopt a resolution to proceed. So I've had to back that up and skip the month of July, which is why I've said June 16th, the second board meeting in the month of June for the board is really the date I'm shooting at for them to start that process and get their first resolution done. We really don't have enough time without having to have special board meetings in July to push this off into the month of July to still meet our early August deadline.
Okay, thanks for that, Stan. And we do have a question from committee member NJ. Did I pronounce that right?
It's Inya Njai.
I'll never get it
But
right.
it's
I'm
okay.
terrible.
I've
Thank
been
you.
called everything. It's okay. So I am a business owner, but I really like to simplify everything to where I am very clear. And at first I want to thank Madam Chair Adair for saying, please ask whatever questions. This is a safe space. We represent our communities and things like that, because sometimes the numbers kind of get overwhelming. So I just want to drill down a little bit. And this also goes to the statement that Mr. Michael Jones made, where people are not thinking that they want to live in the Columbus school systems district. And when I look at the suburbs like Gahanna, Bexley, Reynoldsburg, their taxes are double, triple, sometimes quadruple what Columbus City pays. And so that makes me think that people think that because they pay more in taxes, which more can go to their school system, that they are getting a better education. So if we pass this levy and our district gets more money, then that's going to afford us, our children, the academic access and the building access to whatever they need to be competitive with other suburbs, so that people will then say, hey, Columbus is right in line with Gahanna, Bexley, Reynoldsburg. And yes, we're okay with moving into the Columbus district. Am I looking at this right? Or can someone kind of shed some light on the way I'm thinking, my thinking process?
From my perspective, I think you are looking at it exactly correct. I just want to remind you that what we're talking about in terms of the life cycle permanent improvement, it is just but one piece of the process. I will say this, no matter what our buildings look like, no matter what our programs look like, we still have this baseline maintenance need. Whether I need to put repair and replace HVAC in a 50-year-old building over time, because that is the building we're going to run our educational program in, or I need over time to be ready to repair and replace that system in a brand new building. Either way, that fundamental underlying need for repair and replacement items on the capital side, that life cycle concept, that will be there. And what you speak about, and I think many of the other committee members speak about, because, you know, education in your community, it's a big deal. And so you want a great academic program in great facilities that are maintained. And we're talking about the maintenance side. The FMP process will get to the great facilities issue. And Dr. Dixon is well on her way to talk to you about great academic programming. And I think when you put those three pieces together, and I'm unapologetic, it takes money to do that. I'm unapologetic about that. And when you put those three pieces together, the maintenance, the facilities, the academic programming, and the staffing, the recruiting and retaining and developing of staff to deliver that education, when you put those three pieces together, that's when it becomes excellent. And now I'm on a soapbox as an individual and not as your CFO.
No, I think that is the $1 million question, though, and that's a very good question. The you know, we want excellent school districts. So I moved from a suburban area to Columbus Public School System, and yeah, my taxes went way down. You know, the folks in my old neighborhood were constantly being challenged with increasing taxes. So we're paying almost 4 times the amount. I live in a very comparable home now. in Columbus school systems to what I lived in when I lived up north, and taxes are much less. Do the kids there get a better school? I don't know. I mean, one thing I can say is that Columbus Public Schools is a very diverse system. You deal with all comers, right? You don't have the options to reject certain students. I know it's a challenging thing, and I know it's something that's on all of our minds. I think the other thing that's on all of our minds is everyone's talked about timing. When is there a good time to do this? Is there a good time to ever do this? Currently, we're in a pandemic. We've been isolated, and we've been we've been in the situation where we may have had a lot to think about. Or we do have a lot to think about. Oh, this is a very, very important issue. We're going to need to go to a resolution. Jim, do you have a question? I see you turn your mic off before we move to the next part, because I think we want to present the resolution, and we can.
Let's go, brother. Let's go. Let's go. You want me
I'm
to
not
put
trying
forth
to
the
cut off the
resolution?
conversation, but
Yeah. No, that's it. I was ready to go. I was getting ready to say, let's go.
because we're going to need to make a recommendation, and I know it's painful. I know we'll never have all of the information. Never. We could sit here, and so you have to vote with how you feel, and I think we'll be comfortable with whatever that outcome is. Stan, could you can you view that? Put the resolution, the recommended resolution. We can work on the language.
These are the options, and again, this was in draft form. I can wordsmith this live if you like, but the recommendations were 4.5 mils for life cycle replacement, 0.2 for the technology piece. If you want to do them both, I would do C, which is 4.7, obviously, to do both. And then the kind of the standalone piece is recommending to the board that they begin the process to update and review the facility master plan.
So are there any clarifying questions for anyone before we begin a roll call vote process?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I would be comfortable with option C if we remove the language about November 2020 general election ballot. And I would be comfortable with option D if we take out everything after plan.
Okay, so I think Stan's working that right now. So place a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils. And that would be the recommendation. And then I guess, are you saying that we would just recommend that to the school board and then they can decide what timing should be?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I mean, that way we can allow the school board to decide what is best for the district as far as putting it, when to put it on the ballot. And then as far as my addition or my deletion from D, I just think that the Facilities Master Plan Committee would determine its goal about placing a bond issue on the ballot, not this.
Okay. Any other comments? I think Stan.
Mr. Chair, I concur with that comments on D from Joe Ellen.
Okay.
Stan, I'll note real quick, you have to fund twice in C.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I want to fund it twice, Joe Ellen. Please. And I think we'd have to wordsmith the beginning of that. Recommend that they, rather than place, would a word like consider be better? That they consider a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils to fund the district's life cycle replacement needs and technology plan?
I agree.
Would that be?
I would agree with that too.
That'd be good. Okay. that they, let me strike that out. I should probably be doing this in track changes. It would be easier, wouldn't it? That they, consider a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils. Might I ask, can I, for sake of clarity here, can I take A and B out real quick? Can I mean, if we're going to, pardon me?
I was going to suggest that, my feeling is that we're in really tough economic times, and I think it's important that maybe in this situation that voters get a choice. Maybe they can't afford 4.5 mils, but they could afford that 0.2 mils. Or maybe they can afford both. But I think giving the voters a choice between having two issues on the ballot is good for voters. It gives them a choice. It's more like I think it gives us a chance to pass something instead of maybe nothing. But that's for the board to decide. But I think that if we're going to recommend something, that's what I would recommend, splitting it.
Yeah, I don't see it the same way. I don't think 4.7 mils is enough, to be honest with you.
I'm not saying it is, Jim. I'm just saying that in these tough economic times, this gives voters a chance, a choice.
I don't giving voters a choice.
Money, and we talk about paying taxes in the suburbs. Obviously the median income for a family is a lot different in a city like Bexley than it is in a city like Columbus. So we have some people that are really, really struggling, and they work hard for their money, and maybe this gives them an option.
Eva, you had a comment?
I disagree with that, in that I think the average voter isn't going to look at that and say, how much money is that actually going to be? And am I for this or not for this? They're going to look at that as two separate levies. Do I want to? And all they're going to see is, this is going to raise my taxes 2 times. I don't want to do that. If it just has one number, they're not going to have really a clue what that one number is. And, I say keep it as together. And I also think you have a better chance passing a levy during a general election. And so we can recommend it however, but I just want the board to know that my opinion is that it is better to go for 2020.
I think we had a lot of that discussion at the last meeting, and that was the consensus as well. Any other?
Yeah, this is Lois. I do have a concern though. I mean, I understand that some of you think people won't say, well, one way or another, but if I had a choice, I would know one was technology and one was buildings maintenance and upkeep. So they may lean one way versus the other way by keeping them separate. By merging them together, we may get them to totally vote the whole thing down.
Any other discussion about that? Anybody?
Jordan, yeah, I don't think I don't think the choices are equal, right? So whether you're talking about the 4.5 or the 0.2, they're for separate things. And you can't get past the fact that 4.5 is to take care of our current infrastructure. So it's stuff that we own right now. And with anything, if you don't take care of what you own, it crumbles, it becomes obsolescent. I mean, it goes into obsolescence and it can't be usable. And then you're investing more dollars later on to replace something if you don't take care of it would still be in existence. So I just think that the 4.5, to me, that's our infrastructure. We have to take care of our infrastructure. The 0.2 is a totally different thing. It's with regards to our technology needs. But I don't think it's an either or kind of conversation. I think they're both needed, but I think 4.5 mils for our ongoing maintenance of our infrastructure is it's almost necessary.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm open to however the committee wants to consider that. I was just mentioning at the last meeting, we had a pretty deep conversation about this, and that was the consensus then. It may have changed now.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say, I think that I have confidence in our voters for them to make the right decision. So any way that this is placed in the resolution to the board, I think that our voters, they know the needs of our schools and our families and our students. Now more than ever, I think they know the needs of a technology plan. The mayor strongly supports anything that district will do in education, in technology, I apologize. And then the other thing I just want to say is this is still a resolution that then goes to the board so that then they still get the final say in whether that's one piece or two pieces or three.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. Is there any other comments about that? How would we word that, Stan, to include?
I was just gonna see if I'm hearing maybe something here. Maybe this would be that that they consider a permanent, permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.5 mils to fund district life cycle replacement needs, and or a permanent improvement levy of 0.2 mils to fund the technology plan. Kind of, could we write it as an and or? Does that make sense? And then leave it up to the board to decide the and or, as you're leaving it up to the board to decide the timing, since you want to take out the November ballot language. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I think that helps.
Stan, could you also say that it's, a levy an amount of 4.7 mils on the ballot, and then list what they do, 4.5 mils for permanent improvement and 0.2 mils for technology?
You mean in the ballot language?
Yeah, not really an and or, but this is what it does. It's 4.7 and this is what it's for. These two things.
I'm not an expert on what all we can put in the ballot language. That's a legal question.
Yeah.
But if I hear you correctly, what you're suggesting is that it go on as one issue, but in the specifications of the ballot language indicate that breakdown.
I think that's what I was suggesting. I would support that.
Yeah,
But
I was
thought
wondering
you
if
couldn't segregate the funds.
that was the question.
No, we're not segregating the funds, but what we're doing is clarifying the
intent.
The intent.
Yeah, the intent
in the ballot language. I'd have to check with bond counsel on that, and that'd be certainly something that we'll consider at the board level.
This is Michael Jones. I think that leaving it as you presented it, Stan, I don't like the idea of combining it with 4.7 at the ballot level, because I think it does a couple of things. It tells people do the 4.7 or do nothing. In addition to that, it almost does not give people a choice if the school board decides to take it to a ballot and does it separately. Providing the 0.2 mils does something that I was kind of describing earlier. It will help to begin a higher level of confidence in the district. If, for example, that were to be the one thing that got improved, demonstrating coming out of this pandemic where Columbus City Schools is performing at a higher level, a stronger level, a higher technology level. I think that the more options we provide people, the better. We're sitting here understanding all of these issues. And to someone's earlier point, the public is intelligent, but are they going to parse all of this apart when they're sitting, maybe in the election booth or, in their car as they prepare for it? Because it's a lot. It's a lot to kind of digest. And I think the simpler thing is to keep it separate as it is and just add the and or from our standpoint, presenting it to the board.
Let me just throw this out at the committee. I hope that we're not struggling over a dilemma that is an artifact of simply how we presented it. I didn't think of this when we were putting our presentations together. because I was working with facilities on the first part and Dr. Dixon was working on her part. And I never thought that presenting two different millages for the parts of the plan, would break them apart like that. I'm wondering if the committee would have felt differently if we would have done all the presentations and at the end made our recommendations, and the recommendation from the district would have been, from the district administration would have been, and we recommend that you fund our life cycle replacement needs and our technology upgrade needs with a 4.7 mil levy. Had that been the only presentation, would we be parsing out those two different items?
I'm sure not. This is Michael Jones again. So great point, Stan. But we have at this point, and to me, the technology piece is an important credibility piece. I think it does a lot for the school board, and it does a lot for the school system by improving the technology availability and access. It improves things by leaps and bounds, and that by itself is going to be demonstrative in what hopefully the community begins to see, the taxpayers begin to see in results much easier than what they might see in this permanent improvement fund for the permanent improvement levy.
I don't think in a permanent improvement levy, the community will not appreciate it, because there's been lots of conversation over the past year and a half about the condition of some of our buildings, where you got kids on the west side with winter coats on and kids on the south side of the building with summer clothes on. So the repair and condition of our buildings are very important to the community. Some parents move into a particular neighborhood based on the appearance of the outside of a building. So I think my issue here is not if we separate the two. My issue here is whatever we put on the levy, it has to be followed through from the board as well as the community. We can't keep making false promises and backpedaling when a few neighborhoods speak and scream louder than other neighborhoods. So if we're going to say we're supporting a 4.5 mil levy to do repair and maintenance, it should be equally or at least distributed properly throughout the district, not based on whose voice is the loudest in the community. So I get a little bit more repair in my building because I know how to complain and call the right people, where another building is totally neglected because those parents don't know how to initiate that conversation in the community. So either way we go, I'm fine with it. I just have served on enough of these levy committees and enough of these facility master plan committees that we as a group give our time to the district. And yes, it's the board's final decision. If we're in a partnership, we all have to work on it together. And so all I'm asking is, however the motion goes, that if I put my name and stamp behind it, I'm going to hold the board accountable. And I would hope that anybody else on this committee who puts a stamp on it to take a levy to the table will hold the board accountable and say, this is what you promised in that levy, and this is what we expect coming out of it.
See, I'm hearing a couple different things, I guess. One thought was 4.5, and the other thought is 0.2 mils. And we could take out the November on both of those, I believe. The other was just 4.7 with just kind of an allocation embedded in the language of what they would be used for. Is there somebody hearing something different than that? Or is there a strong preference for one? Sounds like, Sean, what you were asking for was the choice between, or not the choice between, but equal portion of 4.5 is one piece, 0.2 is another piece. Those will be two different votes by members of the community.
No, Jordan, I'm sorry. Just for point of clarification, I don't see those as equal things. I think to Stan's point earlier, if it were presented as the 4.7 initially with both of those the technology piece embedded in the life cycle replacement piece, we wouldn't even be parsing words. And so, yeah, I don't see it as two separate things. I see it as one thing. I think that we should move forward just with one thing. I think that if you give voters the choice between, I got an option of the 0.2 mil or a 4.5 mil, I'm going to choose the lesser of both evils, right? So I'm going to choose the 0.2 mil in a heartbeat. So why even ourselves?
Is everybody seeing it that way? Is there somebody seeing it different? Because that's how I saw it too, Sean, how you just described it, that'd be 4.7, then we could decide, it would give them the option to separate these two categories out. But I think we feel strongly about the technology piece as well as the other piece. So, so Stan, does that make sense to you, that we could show that as a resolution and then we can advance it to a vote? Or I guess get a motion to approve it in a second, and then we go for a vote.
So have we kind of moved our way back to C and D as they're written here? That the board
C and D. I think you want to break out between the 4.7 though, embedded in the C.
Okay. I'm trying to think of how to word that, because that's ballot language, and I want to make sure.
We can't do that. I mean, just, you know, let me be wrong. Just, I mean, honestly. So right now, we're asking the board to consider a permanent improvement levy of 4.7 mils to fund the district's life cycle replacement needs and technology plan, period. That's my motion.
Okay, anybody have it different than that? Okay, hearing none, I go along with that recommendation.
And
I think that's Jim, before.
Did the motion leave out paragraph D?
Got to put my freaking glasses on again, dude. Come on.
Did the motion take out what?
Yes,
Yeah, are we?
it did. Yes, the way that we just stated it, it did leave out D.
So I'll amend that motion then. And then also, right, secondly, sorry, my lighting is horrible in here. Okay. And further resolved that the Millage Committee recommends to the Board of Education, the City of Columbus District, that the board formally begin the process to update and renew the district facilities master plan.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by who was that?
Kimberly Mills.
Kimberly, thank you. Okay, Stan, we're ready for a roll call vote.
Okay, let me read the resolution back, if you may.
Okay.
You know, it begins up here with several whereas statements, which are just descriptive of where we've been. And the meat of this is, now therefore be it resolved. The Millage Committee recommends to the Board of Education of the Columbus City School District that, and it's the items highlighted in green, they consider a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils to fund the district's life cycle replacement needs and technology plan, and be it further resolved that the Millage Committee recommends to the Board of Education of the Columbus City School District that the board formally begin the process to update and renew the district's facility master plan. And I think I can take out that and right there. I was a little redundant there. And be it further resolved that the Millage Committee recommends that the Board of Education consider and make a decision on these recommendations no later than its regular board meeting scheduled for June 16th. Do I have the motion correct?
I think you have it correct. We've got a first and a second. So I believe we're ready for a roll call vote unless there are still questions.
As I did on the minutes, I'll call your last name. Please unmute yourself and indicate your vote as yes or no. Callaway?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Barosa de Padilla?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
What are you signing for, Lois? Fuck, you're getting what you want. What the fuck is wrong with you?
No, I'm really not, but okay.
Klein?
Aye.
Caniglio?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
McVeigh?
Yes.
Mills?
Yes.
Njai?
Yes.
Nahara?
Yes.
Negron?
Yes.
Smido?
Yes.
Terrell?
Yes.
I believe I got everybody, and in that case, the motion carried. I did run through the list. There was no one remaining to vote no. If I've missed someone, please speak up. Thank you. That motion is carried.
Thank you, Stan, and thanks to everybody on the committee. I know it's not an easy choice. I mean, we're living in a very, very difficult time, and there's no certainty at all about tomorrow, or let alone the future. But now the board will have, it's a tough challenge. They'll have to go through a process to find out the timing and to decide what's right for the Columbus City school systems. And as a committee member, we're all passionate about the school system, but they're responsible for the school system. So I think their challenge will be large, and I think it's one that they'll have to have some careful consternation about. And I would ask each of the committee members if they have very, very strong feelings to reach out to the members of the school board for further deliberation. Chair Adair, Board President Adair, do you have any closing comments that you want to make before we turn this off?
Just thank you. Thank you all so much for this discussion and for caring. I think it was very apparent that each of you cares deeply about our district and our children's.
Dr. Dixon, I'll let you make the last comment if you have one.
Thank you again. Thank you to the committee for just serving the Columbus community, listening to the needs of our district, and helping us address those in this way. When we think about facilities are a large part of the educational environment. And we know that we need to make sure that those facilities are conducive to learning, and for our students and our teachers to be able to teach, and students to be able to learn in that environment. So the immediate needs that we have as far as technology and being in those top and improved facilities is so important to our students. We don't want our students to continue to have inequities. If there is a way that we can strongly say that we want something more for our students in this fashion. Long-term plans are still coming. So I want to say thank you to the community and the board to say that we did not come and ask the community for something that we have not thought through thoughtfully, and that's that long-term plan. I think that we have to do our due diligence and say, what is the future of that work and what does it look like? And until we have that crystal clear, then we don't come to the community. But the piece that we do know is that our learning environments we must have improved learning environments. Those conditions for our students must be so that they can learn without those classroom barriers of not having air conditioning, not having floors repaired, not having a proper heating, and have technology. That future, using technology again, is the future. And we're going to make sure that our students have that right now and in the future. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for those closing remarks. I don't think anybody could say it any better. And thanks again to all the committee members for your time and deliberation. I know it takes a lot out of your busy schedule to consider these things. Thank you, and I will consider the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.